Okay, folks, well, good afternoon and welcome to another one of our TESS talks. As you know, TESS is our JCU's Center for Tropical Environmental and Sustainability Science, and it's really one of our leading forums here for work, and particularly in the terrestrial tropical realm and all the land use and other kinds of issues, and also things like paleoecology and quite an eclectic group of things. It's a real pleasure today to introduce Dr. Alain Ngute and Emma Mackintosh, who's a doctoral candidate. Both are affiliated with the University of Sunshine Coast, which is becoming quite a respectable center in a lot of ways for forest research, tropical research. I don't mean to be too patronizing there. Yeah, good job there, Johnny. Sorry, that came up. I probably really made a mistake there, but anyway, didn't mean it to sound quite the way it did. Anyway, we're so glad that you little people could join us today. So Alain is from Cameroon, and I'm sure he's an absolutely wild fan of football. Would that be? Of course he is. And Elaine's, are you from Queensland?
I'm actually English.
Sorry, you're English.
I live in Queensland now.
Okay, well, she would also be a serious football fan. I'm just mentioning that because I was going to make a joke about footy and football and that type of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't get it. I wouldn't.
Yeah, a lot of these guys probably wouldn't. They don't get a lot of my jokes anyway. So, anyway, it's a pleasure to turn this over to them. They're going to talk about lianas, which are one of the really hot issues, I think, in ecology these days, the vines that proliferate and having important ecological effects. And without further ado, we'll thank them for joining us. And thank you very much for flying up and joining us today. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill, for the good introduction and also for flying us over to talk about liana, and also, of course, for the compliments about in USA doing well in research. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about liana, the whole seminar, and I'll start by giving a brief overview of a recent publication we co-authored with Bill and Susan and Mason. It's about the global increase in liana dominance worldwide. And also after this, I will hand over to Emma, who will talk about a more locally relevant research, that is the findings she did under her PhD in Queensland wet tropic. So as I said, my talk will be focusing about this recent paper in global change biology. And we had a lot of great contribution worldwide with JCU well represented, as you can see. So I'll start by giving you a background about tropical forest and liana, of course. So as you know, tropical forests are globally important and relevant to fight against climate change. So tropical forests cover roughly 7% of Earth's land surface, and they host most of Earth diversity, like Earth terrestrial biodiversity. And they also constitute Earth lung, as they help us capture carbon dioxide and store them into their biomass. However, tropical are threatened mostly by our activities, human activities. So lot of logging around, farming, infrastructure building, and mining. So that is quite a hot, a burning topic nowadays about keeping tropical forest standing. So beside of this, we also have some natural disturbances which occurs just randomly by chance. And we all know about lightning strike. They also kill trees and they decrease tropical forest capacity of storing carbon. So we also have climate crisis, which is kind of a mixture of human and natural disturbances. So all these factors threaten tropical forest. So in tropical forest, we have an important group of plants called liana. So let's talk about liana. We all remember Tarzan and Jane swinging in the jungle using lianas or using vines. So these are actually called lianas. So liana are woody vines. So liana grow in tropical forests. and other subtropical and temperate forests, but they are mostly abundant in tropical forests. So what is common about liana is that they can't access forest canopy themselves, so they need to rely on other plants for support in order to reach forest canopy. So that's their common strategy. So they are kind of not parasitic, but kind of structural parasites. So kind of rely on other plants in order to access canopy. Then by doing so, liana compete with trees. Yeah, but also what is common, what is known about liana is liana have a less carbon storage capacity, carbon storage capacity compared to trees. So that is also one of the reasons liana are becoming concerning. I mean, the increase of liana abundance is becoming concerning because liana take advantage of trees, take advantage in tropical forests when disturbance reaches certain level or when disturbance increases, because liana are normally part of the ecosystem. So liana are part of tropical forest ecosystem, and they also contribute to forest diversity and other aspects. But in the tropical forest ecosystem context, liana compete with trees. So they compete with trees for various kind of resources, and this is mostly above and below ground resources. So above the ground, liana compete with trees to reach the canopy, especially when there's canopy opening. So liana will try to reach the canopy to access sunlight. And by doing so, liana will cause some damages on trees, like they will strangulate trees, and they will also block trees, leaves from accessing sunlight. So below the ground, liana have also good adaptation in using minerals and water resources. So, and also liana have better adaptation overall in living in disturbed area compared to relative to trees. So they are kind of equipped, they are kind of better equipped to take advantage in disturbance context. So by competing with trees, liana have some negative contribution, like negative impact. For instance, liana cause decrease in tree growth and reproduction, and they suppress sapling growth, and also the increased sapling mortality. So liana also decreases the carbon storage capacity of the forest, because liana have less carbon storage capacity compared to trees. So when they take over and they become dominant or abundant, they kind of reduce the forest overall capacity of capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So, but liana are not only negative, as I said before. So liana have some positive contribution to forest ecosystem. So liana, that's where the dilemma is. So liana contribute to forest diversity. So liana produce a lot of edible fruit. Liana also store carbon, even though the carbon storage capacity is less than trees. So liana also produce a lot of leaves and materials which decays and contribute to soil fertility. Liana can also serve as a movement for animal. For instance, liana link one tree to another, which is kind of a highway for some animals, especially monkeys, and also some insects. We don't need to go down the forest before climbing up here. So, and also liana have some other contribution which have been termed like a bandage. So when they are around, they limit further damage to already disturbed forests. So for instance, liana will protect a forest from being burned by fire. Like the flammability of a forest will decrease because of the liana blanket. So if a forest burn and there's a lot of liana at the edge, the tree within the forest will have higher chance to survive because liana protects the trees from that forest to access. So liana also help trees to survive following lightning strike, which is kind of a debate because some research have shown that liana increases the chance of tree to die because, of more trees to die following lightning strike. So liana also protect the forest from being damaged like by strong wind. So like just by covering them. So that's kind of the positive contribution of liana in tropical forest. So when a forest is damaged and have been degraded, it looked like this. So there's a lot of liana around, and below this liana blanket, there are some ecosystem processes going on. So a lot of sapling below, a lot of fauna, and yeah, but you can't access it because of this liana blanket. So some people also use liana because liana have higher water storage capacity relative to trees. So there's a group of liana that store a lot of water. We call them water liana, and they produce quite a huge amount of drinking water. And also, I've noticed during my fieldwork in Tanzania that during dry season, elephant chew liana to get water during dry season. And yeah, so these are pygmies. This is a pygmy, which is like an indigenous tribe group living in Central African forest. So they use liana for their drinkable water. So since we talk about liana, increase in liana success, so recently, for the recent decades, liana have been a huge topic around, there have been a huge interest around liana impact on tropical forests. So a lot of interest, lot of studies have shown that liana is increasing, and this increase in liana due to disturbance is kind of concerning. So a lot of study around. And also liana proliferation can cause liana dominance. So by dominance, we mean like the competitive success of liana relative to trees. So they kind of dominate. It's not like liana overshading tree. No, the kind of, by dominance, we mean like relative contribution, like relative abundance to trees. So it's not like we have, in a forest, we have more liana than trees. But if we look at a relative measure, so we will see that liana is kind of taking over. So a lot of studies have shown that, and with a lot of tangible data, and this increase in liana success relative to tree is threatening tropical forest and world forest as a whole. So this is kind of like the background of the study we recently published. And also this study is based on a liana threshold hypothesis, because there's this recent study that have shown, or that have hypothesized that liana, that beyond certain disturbance threshold, liana might prevent forests from recovering. So, which is kind of a debate. And this study, this talk is kind of, this study we perform is kind of a first step toward verifying this hypothesis. So it's still a debate, and we still need like more proof to evidence. So we also have other studies which have explained the increase in liana competitive success related to trees. So and now we base our question for this research. We base our question on the competitive success of liana over trees. So firstly, we wanted to know which are the key drivers of liana competitive success relative to trees, and now how does that vary in various environmental conditions worldwide, because so far, most studies have focused on local data and regional evidence, but no study did pull together liana and trees and compare their relative performance at the global scale. So for this study, we use a meta-analysis, which is like a study of studies. So we pulled together over 1,000 of publications from several databases, and we use some criteria to keep or to discard some. Then we ended up with 83 publications reporting both liana and trees metrics. Then we extracted these metrics, and we ended up with like 610 observation, which means 556 unique location worldwide, and this cover 44 countries and 6 continents. So for all of these locations, we pull climate data and topographic data, and we did some modeling to show that that liana dominance is can mostly be predicted by forest disturbance and temperature, which means annual temperature, and elevation, which is a component of topography. So that's what our modeling showed. Our model showed. Then we also found that the pattern in liana dominance varied with these predictors. For instance, liana tend to outperform trees in disturbed forests. Remember, forests can be disturbed by human and natural factor. And we also noticed that liana dominance decreases with elevation, and which means liana dominance, that liana take over trees mostly in lowland. And we did notice that liana dominance increases with rising temperatures. So in forests that have higher temperature, liana will tend to compete trees because liana are better adapted to warm conditions. Then we also noticed that liana dominance increases with declining rainfall. So forests receiving less precipitation are more susceptible to liana dominance, which is likely to prevent their resilience, because liana, when they dominate, they prevent the hinder forest recovery. Then still under our modeling, so we had some chronosequence data, which is kind of data showing the time since disturbance. So we had disturbance data, but now for disturbed area, we extracted the time since disturbance, and we did notice that that when a forest is disturbed, liana dominance tends to increase over time. I mean, with time since disturbance, when temperature increases. So above a certain temperature threshold, liana dominance can last for years. And we did notice that precipitation also boosts liana, also maintain liana dominance over a certain time. So forests receiving less precipitation are more susceptible to liana dominance. Then now we calculated a variable called climatic water deficit. That is about in average the quantity of water a forest or an area should be receiving, and the deficit of that. So we did notice that when the deficit is higher, which means when the forest is drier or the area is drier, liana tend to maintain their dominance over time. I mean, with increasing time since disturbance. It's not a temporal modeling, but it's like a spatial thing. Yeah, but it shows that the older, the drier a forest is, the longer liana can maintain their dominance. So these are our key findings. Yeah. So we noticed that overall the study shows that liana dominate in disturbed forest context and warmer temperature, lower precipitation, and when the water deficit is higher. And this mostly takes place in tropical lowland. So when you go toward the equator, liana dominance is higher, and when you go at higher elevation, liana dominance decreases. Then we also notice that liana dominance can persist over years, and especially in contexts where climate favor liana dominance, climate favor liana compared to trees. So so overall, our study showed that disturbed forests with climate favoring liana should be highly prioritized for restoration measurement, for restoration practice and management, which means we should focus our effort in managing a balance, or in keeping a balance between liana and trees in those areas. It's not like we are supposed to go out there and cut all the lianas in order to allow the forest to grow. Now we need to maintain a certain balance in order to give more chance to trees, so that the forest can regain their ecosystem services. So that is all about my talk for today and my study. And I didn't do this alone, of course. I had a lot of contribution worldwide. This was my first PhD paper, and I would like to thank all of the contributors, and also thank you here for listening and for giving me the chance to talk to you. I will hand over to Emma to talk about her interesting finding from Queensland wet tropics. Thank you. And I guess we'll keep the question for the end. Turn it on.
Oh, do I not need this? Do you not use it?
Turn it on.
Okay, hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. It's a great honor to be invited to James Cook University, for sure. And coming from the near Sunshine Coast. No, I'm joking. But yeah, and thank you, Alan, for that interesting talk. So yeah, Alan's work was all about the big global picture, but my stuff is more specific to just the wet tropics. So my PhD was investigating the relationship between lianas and Australian rainforest recovery. And I have submitted it, but I'm still waiting for the examiners. So hopefully soon to be doctor, but we'll see. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about like the background and the rationale, hopefully not repeating Alan too much, and then talk through two of my interesting findings from my thesis. So firstly, yes, obviously, as Alan said, lianas, they're woody vines. They root in the ground, but rely on trees for structural support to climb up and access the canopy. And also in the wet tropics, we have a lot of this lovely plant, rattan, which is not actually woody, it's a climbing palm, but I did include that as a liana. Like I obviously noted that they were separate, but in most of the studies, I included them together because they, although biologically they're different, they seem to fill the same ecological niche. So I think if you left out rattans, you'd be ignoring like a big part of the climbing community. And I also included other climbing monocots like flagellate indica in this liana definition. So when I say lianas, this is what I mean. And yep, the study region, so in the beautiful wet tropics where you all live, or lucky to live. My main research area was around Mission Beach and going up into the Atherton tablelands. Oh.
And people online.
Oh yeah, so around Mission Beach, in the lowlands and the elevational gradient up into the Atherton tablelands. And Mission Beach has what seems to be a big problem with liana proliferation because it was hit severely by two tropical cyclones, Larry in 2006 and Yassi in 2011. So it's an important place to be studying lianas and maybe help guide potential management options. So yeah, obviously rainforests are super important for the carbon sink. So, and also for this area, tourism in general, like it's better to be looking at nice big lush trees rather than real like messy liana dominated patches on the side of the road, which a lot of Mission Beach kind of looks like now. So it, yeah, would be good if we could get the rainforest looking like it's growing again. So yeah, in particularly around Mission Beach, because it got hit by the cyclones, because it got hit by the cyclones, yep, lianas proliferated, and then as they have a negative impact on trees, it tended to suppress, or appears like it's suppressing the regrowth of the trees, and you get the canopy stays open, there's more light, it favors lianas, they tend to keep proliferating, and you kind of have what seems to be a positive feedback loop with disturbance, and maybe this could only be sort of, you could only break out of the loop if you cut the lianas. But as Alain said, caution must be taken because they are still native species. And yeah, so I think like if obviously if a tree falls down in a continuous expanse of forest, lianas proliferate, that is a natural part of succession. But around Mission Beach especially, the rainforests are very fragmented and some parts have been selectively logged. So it's thought that this combination of the natural disturbance and the human disturbance is sort of pushing rainforests sort of, or like reducing their resilience and pushing them beyond what they're able to recover from naturally. So yeah, two of my research questions. One was how do lianas affect or relate to biomass recovery? And the second one, very similar to Alain's, but on a more regional scale, and what are the environmental drivers of liana dominance over trees? And it's important to look at this regionally as well as globally, because obviously global is super important in terms of global change and climate change, but at an individual region, there's also like local effects and local climate and topography and stuff that could be having an effect that would get diluted when you look at the big global picture. So to answer these questions, my methods were setting up some vegetation plots in the area that were 20 metre by 20 metre, where we measured every single stem over 1 centimetre dBH, which was obviously fun being in the field, but can be very tedious because some of them have lots of stems. One of them, I think, literally had like 700 really tiny ones. And yeah, and then from that, we had all the liana measurements and all the tree measurements, and we were able to calculate this measure of liana dominance that Alain was talking about, the liana tree ratio. And we used the liana basal area divided by tree basal area. So the first question, I dabbled in a bit of remote sensing to answer this, because obviously it takes longer than the time frame of a PhD for biomass to maybe recover to a meaningfully like measurable level. So this started off a bit of a journey into the remote sensing world where so I developed a model that could put, like, using my plot data and satellite data acquired from Rapid Eye, I made a model that could predict biomass across the landscape, and yeah, created an upscaled map. And this actually was quite hard because obviously in tropical forests, it's quite a big problem that satellite imagery tends to saturate because it just looks green to the sensor. And even these liana-dominated areas where the tree biomass is low, lianas produce a lot of leaves. So to the sensor, it still looks green. So it was hard to distinguish between the two, but you incorporate a measure of texture. So this is how different neighboring pixels are to each other. It kind of gives a measure of like the heterogeneity of the canopy, and these open plots were more messy and the closed plots with less lianas have more continuous. So that helped us make the model that predicted with, I think, reasonable accuracy considering it's the tropics. And then backscale this using historic satellite sensor data onto imagery following the last major cyclone in 2011, and then use this to calculate biomass change at both the landscape scales level and in each of my plots, and then related this to present day liana data. So actually found biomass was lost in 34 out of 40 of the plots that were included in the study. And this is my map, and the red areas show where biomass is lost. And in plots with a greater liana tree ratio, more biomass was lost. So this sort of suggests that when the lianas proliferate following disturbance, they continue to proliferate and are causing further tree mortality, which is a bit worrying and makes you think that maybe you would need to introduce cutting to improve biomass recovery. And then my second question was, what are the environmental drivers of liana dominance over trees? So in each plot, I also collected data on environmental variables. So this included some measures like soil measures like pH and phosphorus, topographic measures like elevation, slope, and aspect, and then the climate variables, which were extracted from the World CLIM publicly available data set. And then I put this all in a model to look at what the relative effect, or which of these variables was most important in determining liana tree ratio in the area. So when I first investigated each variable individually and their relationship with liana tree ratio, as this mirrors Alain's, the lianas, there's more lianas with increasing temperature and less lianas with increasing elevation, but we found more lianas with increasing precipitation. So that's different to Alain, but I think this is because our range of precipitation is only a fraction of what was included in the global study. And also, I think the precipitation is like an artifact of the elevation gradient. So that kind of emphasizes how it's important not to just apply global findings to a region without like considering the local climate and local effects. But when we put everything into the model, we did find the most important variables were whatever climate variable was included, disturbance, and the interaction between disturbance and climate. And you'll see this is evident in the plots that are heavily disturbed. So ones that have no tall tree canopy, basically. There's a much stronger effect of, say, temperature on the liana tree ratio. So overall, we found lianas grow better in the warmer, wetter lowlands where there's heavy disturbance, and in particular, this interacts with the climate that's favourable to lianas. So the implications, potentially vine cutting could be useful, but I put an asterisk there because, as Alain said, vines do play a big positive role in the ecosystem as well, so you wouldn't want to just cut them all without question. And even like a local example, cassowary feeds on some fruit from vine species. I think I read a paper once that said that tree kangaroos might nest in these vine tangles. And also this is a real concern here is I think if you cut the native vines, would you just be creating space for invasive weeds to move in, which are even worse and don't have the same biodiversity benefits? So this would need to be, carefully monitored if cutting ever were to be implemented. And obviously the interaction between disturbance and climate that we found is concerning in light of climate change and ongoing disturbances to forests. And And yeah, I collected a lot of data in my PhD that I didn't actually have time to analyze yet. But yeah, I think this would help understand more about maybe the buffering or bandage effect that Alain mentioned that lianas might be having. So measuring leaf area index and microclimate, looking at that in like the closed canopy plots and the liana dominated plots would indicate, you know, whether lianas might be helping maintain the microclimate in an area that would otherwise be vulnerable to like drying out and overheating. And also species richness. There's some studies that indicate lianas, like lianas affect some tree species more than others, or some trees are better at surviving liana infestation. So if you cut lianas, would this potentially alter like tree community composition? So that could be something that is important to look into as well. But yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for having us.
Q&A going here. Fantastic. Thank you, Emma and Alain. Before I forget, also, I meant to thank Annabelle Belson, whose
She just ran away.
efforts in organizing this. So,
Yeah,
that's
she was very, yeah.
Okay, so questions? Sue?
So Emma,
Mm-hmm.
when I've gone out to count lianas and I've had returns, I've just actually sort of given up on returns because they're so hard to estimate their biomass because a lot of it's sort of collapsed on the ground. And then you have what's growing on the tree. How did you estimate the biomass?
This makes me sound like a psycho because I measured like the DBH of the rattan stems where I could get to them. So it was like a basal area, but not we didn't use biomass because of that, because you can't accurately estimate. Yeah. And I think at one point, Andy did try to get someone to harvest some rattans to find an equation, but the couple that this guy did harvest for us, just, you know, like nothing correlated with its biomass. So you couldn't really make, you know, like measure something on the ground that then would correlate meaningfully with the rattan biomass. So we just stuck with basal area.
Or just hold the mic.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
You know,
Lucas, sorry.
Thanks, Alain. That was really good, both talks. And I think it's great that you measured the response. Do you think, I was just wondering if, you know, you saw this sort of different result than the global results where liana abundance was increasing with rainfall. Of course, it could be the elevation trend as well. But might it be the ratans that are behaving differently than other lianas?
Yeah, I think there were definitely more rattans at lower elevations, which has higher rainfall. But I did look at, like, separated it out into woody vines and rattans and liana tree ratio. And they all showed that same trend down the elevation gradient, but the rattans one was stronger. So that, yeah, could be driving the liana tree, the trend that's seen with liana tree ratio.
I'm not an ecologist, but this question will probably demonstrate that perfectly. Presumably in these rainforests, the same process that occurred in the past when a cyclone has been through, and yet the forest has adjusted in some fashion, and the ratio, the tree ratio has changed again. I mean, does that give you a clue as to what management might work, or just leave it alone? I mean, I take that's in the relatively understood forest, not the ones that I think that Alain was talking about, particularly where there's a lot of human studies. But it seems to me your suggested interventions extraordinarily demanding of human power, and is it likely to ever happen? There's two questions.
Yeah, I think we did talk to like the Castlereagh Coast Council and Queensland Parks, and that like they are interested in the option of vine cutting because they perceive the vines to be a problem. So I do think that obviously you can, maybe you wouldn't have the manpower to like mass cutting everywhere, but you probably wouldn't want to do that anyway. But I think maybe National Park would cut if they felt that it would definitely improve the forest and were sure of
How
that.
does the system change after the cyclone goes through?
We've got to use the microphones, folks, getting so I think they have online. Sorry. And also, I've just got to ask everybody, please speak louder, so this doesn't get picked up.
So anyway, thank you. You answered my second question, but not my first. No, I didn't make it clear there were two questions. What happens after the cyclone goes through in the forest, decades later?
Oh, you mean you cut them, the
Does
forest
that
recovers, and then
change by itself, not by itself, but
you mean if you leave it, will the forest recover?
yes. Okay,
Yeah. I think.
so why cut the land?
So I think, yes, like they are a natural part of succession, but I think now, because there's additional pressure on the forests from human disturbance and, you know, climate change with increasing temperatures might be increasing tree mortality and things like that. So there's, yeah, I guess like unnatural pressures on the forest. So we might need to do intervention to balance that out.
Really hyper dominant in some places, aren't
Yeah.
Can you hear me online?
Taking into account we have some fairly serious.
Hello?
Landfalls in North Queensland. Were they part of your study?
No, we tried to avoid areas that had invasives just because we didn't want to have too many like variables in there. But yeah, that would be also be important to look at. Like I think the national parks always mention rubers is a really big problem for them. So another study could
And
look at
another
that.
question is, like some areas, not necessarily after the cyclone, but some areas I know a bit further south here where rainforests have just been totally consumed, more or less, or the canopy has been totally consumed by introduced vines, which has killed the forest. What happened there in the end when all that structure planks on the ground? That has become a kind of a level vine ground cover, or does it the vine die out? Can't get elevated.
Yeah, I know what you mean, or like they wouldn't have any. Yeah, if the trees all die, they have nothing to grow on. So they might die too eventually, maybe. But they also tend to, they seem like just kind of grow on top of each other and create like thick blankets. So I don't know if that would help them persist for longer.
Hello? Anyone hear me?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I guess you need to do longer studies. Or maybe eventually some trees would start to poke through.
So Emma, have you considered, if you are thinking about cutting vines, how you actually decide what you're going to cut in terms of species and the size of them, all that sort of thing? Have you thought of that?
I haven't done that in many of my studies, but I think that would be important to look at because I imagine some species seem to be more aggressive than others, and then some species, you know, like a known that cassowaries eat their fruit, for example, so you might not want to get rid of them. So I think you'd, yeah, maybe need to look at do more studies to decide what species. And then, yeah, obviously like really giant ones, they're going to be pretty old and storing some carbon themselves. So maybe you would leave them alone as well and just cut smaller ones. Yeah.
I just wanted to have a comment.
Can you hear me now? Here we go, I'll just turn it on. I don't think you should be too concerned about the cutting because most of the growth is vegetative. So you're not destroying an individual plant, you're just cutting back part of its growth.
Yeah.
And they may well have been rooted, 50 metres away, and they've grown up and down.
Yeah.
And so it's just cutting back some of that growth, but it's not removing the individual species from the community. It still would be there. You're just toning it down.
Yeah, there was part of the study, I didn't talk about it because we didn't really do the study, but we didn't have enough sample size basically, but we did try starting to cut some lianas in some plots. And then the following year, lots of them were just resprouting again. So I don't think in the long term it would cause that much of an issue, but obviously you'd want to do an actual study to be sure of that. That was just observation.
Does anybody online have any questions?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. Is that Noel?
it is, yeah. Sorry.
Okay, Noel, you're gonna have to speak up.
Unable to
We
hear me
just
so
barely
far.
hear you, mate.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, the questions from the floor are very hard to hear unless there's a microphone in the hand.
Yeah.
But I have a question of both of you. Did you look at the difference or comparisons between exotic vines and native ones? Because some of the exotics are very aggressive and kill trees fairly readily, whereas a lot of the natives don't seem to.
Yeah, in Australia, we try to avoid areas that were full of exotics just because that would have been an extra factor to complicate things. But I'm not sure, Alan, if you got many exotics.
Yeah, my field research was based in Tanzania, and they seem to have a dominant vine species there, which they think is exotic. But looking at comparing the behavior of that species, we finally agreed, with botanists, that species was just more adapted compared to other vines. But locally, the thing is dominant, and their national park have been trying to get rid of that vine without deep study. So we noticed that, and so there was a day I was in the park doing my field work, and there was this team of researchers. We just stormed the park, and so they are trying different control methods. So they are using chemicals, cuttings, and biological control. I'm not yet sure about their techniques. Yeah, but they were choosing the wrong vine because of their the knowledge, their view of that vine was like, this vine is exotic, but actually that vine is native. It's just like having more adaptation, better adaptation compared to others. Yeah, then just another story, just another example from Tanzania. There's an area where, which was disturbed like 30 years ago, and that area is populated by chimpanzees. And so there's this huge dilemma there. So chimps like fruit from vines, but those vines are killing nesting trees because chimps are so specific in choosing the trees where they build their nest. So they only build their nest on very selected trees. So those, so there's this dilemma now, whether to cut the vines to allow the tree to give a chance for chimps to build a nest, or leave the vine, because chimps love fruits from those vines. So the dominant vines are the preferred for food, but actually those vines strangle nesting trees. So still now, yeah, so that was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So that dilemma is still persisting. So I've been, since I was doing the research, my fieldwork at that time, so I was being contacted by the National Park Agency for advice. So, but you can't just choose, you can't just make a decision on whether to select a species or not without proper study. So that's just to give you an idea on how difficult the decision can be. Yeah. Okay,
Alan, a quick question for Emma, and then one more question for you. Emma, I was a little bit concerned. You showed a slide, and I don't remember exactly which one it was, but it was where you had, it looked like places that were disturbed or had biomass loss, also had lots of lianas, and it looked like, or your interpretation was that the lianas were driving, it sounded like a longer term suppression of forest biomass. I think I got that more or less right. But the point I wanted to ask is this: how do you separate cause and effect in a situation like that? Like, let's say, for instance, you've just got a big area of forest, homogeneous area of forest, disturbances come in randomly just due to windstorms or something, and you just get these patches, disturbed patches. And these really disturbed patches, you get a lot of dead trees, not a lot of live biomass, and lots of lianas proliferate. Okay, let's say a random disturbance. And you go ahead and you sample that, you're going to get the relationship that you show. You're going to get a strong relationship between reduction in above-ground biomass trees and liana abundance. Okay, so lianas might be driving
Oh, yeah, I see.
Or they might be simply responding to the same environmental disturbance that's causing. the
Yeah,
violence
I
to
think-
produce. Because you didn't mention that possibility.
Yeah,
And
no,
I
that's
thought you
true.
should consider
That's
that. Yeah,
in my paper in review, it is discussed
in the
in the
paper.
discussion
All right.
about how,
good.
yeah, in the, years or months following the cyclone as well, trees can continue to die through delayed mortality. So then that makes the lianas grow. So it kind of can work both ways.
Okay. Yeah.
So I did-
And then Alan, both of you guys mentioned this, and I'm sort of curious, why is it that areas that are somewhat drier are ending up with more lianas? I'm just trying to wrap my head. I have an idea, but I might let you guys ask what you might think about that. That was one of your factors, wasn't it? That was pretty.
Yeah.
I think the answer can be found in the physiology of liana, like the physiological efficiency, like water use and adaptability.
So they just like drier areas because they just like it a bit drier? It's just physiology?
Yeah, like they kind of have more water use efficiency.
Oh, okay. Water
Yeah, and
efficiency.
can
Yeah, that's
resist
fair.
to
That's
dry
a good-
condition.
Okay.
Yeah, compared to trees.
So it's a difference in water use efficiency.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
reckon? Okay, because one thing I guess I was wondering was, in forests that are somewhat drier, they tend to become semi-deciduous, and then if you go right out the spectrum, they can actually get into the monsoonal forest like you get here in Northern Australia, for instance. But what happens in those kinds of ecosystems is you get a lot more light coming into the canopy understory, especially in the dry season, right? So even with forests that are just moderately dry and moderately deciduous, it seemed to me like there might be more ecological opportunities for lianas, especially in the earlier stages where they're getting established. Idea, but I just wonder is that something you thought about, or just seems like it's a mechanism that might be relevant.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's why I also do personally believe that we should also include the ecosystem type, because you can compare like monsoon or miombo, because I'm with rainforest or with a semi-deciduous forest. So we should kind of try to include this local context and ecosystem typology in our finding of liana dominance.
Good. Last chance, folks. Well, it was a really nice presentation. I think everybody here really liked it. It was data-driven and really interesting, and lots of good thought there, and both linking the local with the global. So what was not to like? So thank you guys very much for flying up to see us from the very prestigious University of Sunshine Coast. Thank you. We hope we see you again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.